Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Erica Hornthal. So Erica is a really big advocate for dance movement therapy and embodiment generally. She's a dance movement therapist based in Chicago. It's one of these people that I see online saying cool stuff, and I reached out to you and just went, hey, come on the podcast. So Erica, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
So where are you in the world today?
I'm in good old Chicago, Illinois, right in the center of the United States of America.
I know it. I spent 2 very nice summers at the university there as a kind of an intern for a nonprofit. Had a very nice time in Chicago.
Good. So you got the best of our weather, probably. Not what we're
I did. It was hot. It was hot. It was pretty hot. Yeah, I heard it's rough in the winter. I'm in Israel right now, and the weather is mostly Hamas rockets. So, that's interesting. But so this is a good distraction. So, how did you get interested in the body, Erica? What was the beginning of your journey?
Well, oddly enough, I think I've always used the body, but never realized its full potential. So I grew up dancing. It was my outlet, right, for expression. I think an escape sometimes when things just got really tough or, we have challenges growing up. So it was always, the body was always seen as, I think, performance. It was seen as skill and technique. Whether or not I had it is another story, but it really wasn't until I entered college that I started to realize, thanks to some professors and supervisors, that movement could be used as a catalyst for mental health and for healing and all these wonderful things, right? Embodiment, consciousness, even stream of unconsciousness. And I didn't realize the potential that housed until somebody pointed it out, actually in the form of dance movement therapy. So now I see it very differently. I really, really embrace movement and all that, movement has, especially in terms of dance, from a very psychological, clinical perspective, as opposed to the expressive, artistic, and performance aspect.
Great. So give us a sense of your training, and also people might know what dance therapy, sometimes dance movement therapy in the UK. Give us a sense of what that is and kind of who you trained with to come from with this.
Sure. So I was trained at Columbia College in Chicago, which unfortunately closed their doors last year, but it was one of, I would say, the top 5 programs in the United States. So it had been established, I believe, for 30, almost 40 years. So it had a good track record. It was running for a while. And I got to study with some really wonderful professors, movement therapists that came out of places like Drexel, Leslie, Naropa, and then had the fortune of, practicing all over the world as well. So that was kind of my beginning. And through the program, and actually afterwards, is really where I'm learning more and more about what dance therapy is as I internalize it myself. To me, outside of the, formal definition from the different associations that govern our field, to me, dance movement therapy is really, one, about finding symbolism within our movements. It's about using the body to integrate the mind, the body, and the spirit or the soul. And for me, it's really about finding a way to connect to those parts of us that we don't even know are there. So that could be the self, identity, pieces that are unconscious, kind of expresses through the body, but that our mind often covers up.
Okay, great. And I think what might flesh this out is if you're willing to share a couple of case studies of
sure.
What people, obviously you can make their names anonymous or whatever, but give us an example of a couple of people you've worked with in the last month or two. You're like, okay, and what did you do with these people?
Sure. I can give you 2 examples. They're kind of on either ends of the spectrum. So when I first started working, I still do, but my first population of choice that I really dove into was working with Alzheimer's and various forms of dementia. So actually early on as an intern, I was leading a group of about 6 individuals, male and female, all probably in their late 70s to early 90s, and pretty moderate on the severity of their Alzheimer's disease. So you have people that are disengaged, they may be sleeping, they're in wheelchairs, not your typical healthy aging adult, right? And as a newbie, I kind of walked into the room with just untapped potential. I was playing some classical music just in the background. And, excuse me, some of them started to perk up. I introduced myself as I always do in my groups. I shake a hand, I make eye contact, try to incorporate some just gentle movement, maybe a stretch or breathing or stretching our arms up, just to kind of say hello and orient ourselves to the space. So on a whim, I invited the group to act as if their hands were paintbrushes, which is kind of an abstract thought. And everybody in the staff looked at me kind of like, these people can barely remember places and time. How are you going to meet them in their imagination thinking that their hands are paintbrushes? But I just went with it. And lo and behold, some of them started to follow my movements, which is not the point of dance therapy, but it was getting them moving. It was getting them moving. And I look over and there's this woman, again, in her early 90s. And she's really like, it looks like she's painting a canvas. And she's very detailed with her movement and really focusing her eyes on this, again, so to speak, canvas in front of her. And I kind of bring the movement to a close and I pose the question to the group, what did you paint? And I kind of get blank stares. So my one of the techniques we can use is just asking, Mr. Smith, what did you paint? So I asked this woman next to me, I said, what did you paint? It looked really intricate and that you were very focused on it. And she said, I painted myself in a boat. And I was like, oh. So this sparks conversation. What, have you been on a boat before? Who has been on a boat? We talked about going on cruises. We talked about where we've traveled. So I said, well, what did you see in this boat? And she said, I looked over the edge and I could see my reflection. And as I look at my reflection, my sweetheart puts his arms around me and she starts to cry. And, I said, what's going on? Because that's kind of what we do too, is try to process what's coming up and what people are feeling. And she said, I lost him many years ago. And it's memories and moments like this that allow me to remember him. And no more than maybe 2 minutes later, she had forgotten the experience. She was rummaging through her purse, trying to kind of look for a way to identify where she was and what she was expected to do. And we just, kind of cooled down and closed the group. So, that to me was very early on, just a way that getting into our bodies and moving in a creative way, tap into memories and tap into felt experiences. And for her, it was very validating and very emotional.
Yeah, there's some memories in the body, aren't there? There's particular kind of triggers and kind of how we move. And I've also seen people working with music with dementia and these kind of wonderful results when people kind of hear music from when they grew up and this kind of thing. This is, yeah. Okay, well, I kind of rather like this way of interviewing where we kind of hear about case studies. It's like
more.
real.
I'm happy to share.
Another one, like totally different one. It's another one. I like to kind of interviewing for a change.
Yeah, I can share one actually more recently. So a young woman in her, I would say early 30s, no history of diagnosis. It's not like she's necessarily coming because her psychiatrist referred her, or sometimes people will sit on my couch and say, well, I've got bipolar this and also, and depression and mixed with anxiety. None of that. It was her recognition that she needed a break from work. And so we we sit down, we talk. I want a little bit of background, why are you here? What's going on? And themes come up, right? We're talking about time. We talk about space, needing space on other people's time, not fitting in to the culture of the work environment, and feeling like she was compromising herself. Like, I don't even know who I am anymore because I've spent so much time in this work environment. So she did identify as having a movement past. So with some people who are very in their bodies already, whether it's performance or authentic movement or expression, I will jump right in with their permission. So we did a little bit of an assessment, I like to say, And so I had her do 3 different experiences. So the first thing I asked her to do is just kind of warm up a little bit. She knows how to do this on her own. She's going through her body, just kind of moving her muscles, identifying what parts feel good and what parts are stressed or tense. So I say, take some time, and as you're easing into your body, I want you to start to explore this concept of time, and what that looks like for you. So maybe that means starting off slow. And so really enjoying these glorious, slow, indulgent movements. And at this point, I'm really just watching. I'm kind of observing the movement patterns that are coming up, maybe trying on some of them myself if I want to remember, if I want to ask her about those, and won't necessarily write things down because that's not really my style. So she explores slow time, and then she kind of picks up the pace and explores fast time. And I just ask her to kind of pick her natural pace. And this thought of pace comes up. So she finds it, and I said, tell me what's going on. What does that feel like? And so she said, I didn't love the slowness, but it felt restorative. Mm. And I couldn't go too fast because it was uncomfortable. So this is my natural pace. And I said, what is it like at work? And she goes, oh, it's 10 times faster than this. And I said, do you ever allow yourself to recuperate? And she goes, no, I don't even have time to go to the bathroom. So it sparked this conversation of, again, having to hide a true part of her, like really identifying with what she needs in the workplace while she's trying to keep up with everybody else. So
Right. So it's really nice. Just to jump in there, it's like even just something as like slower and faster movement.
Right.
And which of these is familiar? What does this bring out in your life? Like, is this restorative or not? Mm-hmm. And bringing out that like depth of conversation of someone who's going, I don't even have time to go to the toilet. I'm so busy. Like, I meet with clients as well.
Right.
And just a little bit of movement brings that out. Yeah. Right.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Outsource that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did the same thing for space, and taking up space or minimizing our space.
Right.
Stretching out, compromising our space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And similar things came up. She was like, it feels juicy to take up space and it feels inviting and lovely, but I never do it. Right. And even just thinking about work, her entire body closed in and made like this tight, bound, stature-esque pose. So I took that on myself, and we kind of mirrored it together, and we just agreed, like, this is not the environment that we want to be in. So
right.
Then my favorite thing to do, because we were talking about it. No, you're fine.
I was just saying the body has a way of sort of making patterns obvious, doesn't it? Like you take it on in the body, maybe supported by you doing it, mirroring it to her, showing her it, encouraging her, and then they're really getting into it and going, wow, do I want to do this? And then maybe it's like, hell, I do this too much. And maybe it's just like, oh, this is something I'm just not available to me right now.
Absolutely. And even just taking the time to slow down and identify, wow, I do have some sort of power or maybe even control in these situations, but I'm not even aware of them, until I slow it down and really try to piece out and embody some of these huge themes.
Got it.
So it was really powerful. And it was funny because she was like, what is this going to look like? How is this going to operate? And the minute we got into it, she was like, oh, this is exactly what I need. So good.
That's really nice. Two very different examples. And tell me, like dance therapy, I've met a few dance therapists. Often they're called movement therapists in the UK. And then I always get confused as to the kind of, the names of who's a dance therapist, who's a somatic movement therapist. These are, what are the main kind of traditions here then, the lineages? So there's the sort of people coming out of Jung, isn't there, that are in kind of one school? I mean, are there kind of theoretical frameworks to dance therapy? Like, or are you just pulling these things out when you need them, like space and speed and, things like that?
No, that's a great question. So I have to say that we kind of have a bit of an identity crisis sometimes as dance movement therapists, because we're a lot of things to a lot of different people, including ourselves. Right. So in the United States, we practice as dance movement therapists. In the UK, it's more dance movement psychotherapy. And honestly, when we're in school and we're graduating, we're asked to choose what they call a framework. And in the field, it really looks like almost identifying or sometimes marrying yourself to one specific pioneer. So we end up having kind of this eclectic collection of different ways of practicing, which doesn't really help when we're trying to explain what we do. So honestly, I've sat with this a lot. And so I've actually started to create a list of what I think are like across the board guidelines, frameworks, maybe even like quote laws that govern dance movement therapy or dance movement psychotherapy. And so I realized like a lot of these individually, or maybe even some independent, like, you know, multiples of these cross over to different genres, like different you know, therapeutic dance or conscious dance. So for me, like, this is what's present every time I'm working with really every movement therapist. So it's about using dance or movement as metaphor. It's really about facilitating the therapeutic relationship. So we're really honing and using movement as the intervention and the connection between the client and the therapist. We build, you know, rapport using empathic reflection. It's really seeing dance as the communicator, you know, as the nonverbal communication in the room. A big piece of it is the facilitator or the therapist themselves actually resourcing their body as a way to acknowledge or draw upon a shared experience. Again, like I kind of gave some examples, it's using movement or dance as observation, as assessment or intervention. And I think first and foremost, it is a psychotherapeutic approach. So whether or not we're clinical in our work or whether or not we're diagnosing someone, there is a mental health component to it. So it's about creating awareness and changing the person's perception of their behaviors.
Right. So there's awareness, this perception. I almost feel like dance movement therapy lacks a kind of unified theory sometimes, you know? There's like Laban, which is great for movement, but isn't really psychological. It doesn't have like a unified field theory of physics, or it's sort of lots of cool stuff that's sort of in a bag, you know? And it's like, okay, this is authentic movement technique. And this is you know what I mean? And it's like I kind of often, I'm like, what's the unified thing that holds it together? Like, where would I start if I was wanting to learn this?
Right, which is, it's interesting because like I think back to my schooling, when you sit down, you start to get into these theorists, and it isn't just like Dance Therapy 101. It's like Marion Chase 101. It's Trudy Shoup 101. It's Mary Whitehouse 101. So it becomes this like, how can I create my own framework, which again isn't really helpful in terms of how we talk about or advocate for the work itself. So we're kind of at this crossroads where a lot of us, myself obviously included, are trying to really sit down and think about like, what does a unified framework look like? How do we explain that so that we can not all practice it the same, but we can all kind of come at it from a very unified perspective?
We need to be talking the same language. Well, and like science isn't done according to theoreticians. I mean, unless you have a sort of passing interest in Darwin or Newton or something, you generally don't hear about all the scientists who invented or found each atomic element or whatever. Right. It's just the kind of science thing, and you've got the shared language, and then people go about their science thing, and they have a shared way of talking, you know. And it strikes me that it's not just the dance movement therapy world, the whole embodiment world just doesn't have this. Yeah. And it doesn't have that like shared way of communicating, even not even within a discipline, is pretty sad. But of course we also need to communicate across disciplines. Like I'm talking to Martha Eddy, you know, she's this dance therapist from New York who's visiting me in Brighton, and it's like she's trying to talk from Laban point of view and then a BMC point of view, and I'm coming from my like Aikido point of view, and you know, there's a body therapy tradition which is different from a dance movement therapy. That there's like a whole nother thing, even though they might share a conference every now and again.
I know, right? Confusing.
It's like I would just like, how are we even using like terms to explain what we're doing, let alone to advance it?
Right. And I think the problem with that is that starts to look like we don't always know what we're talking about, and then our validity is questioned. Yeah. Right. It's like, if you can't even explain what you're doing, then I don't think this is a very valid field. And we're like, no, it is. But yeah, how do we get that point across? So, you know, as dance therapists too, like a lot of us were trained in counseling. So we have that piece too, where it's like, well, okay, yeah, I'm Chasian, but I'm also Rogerian, or I'm Freudian, you know, and it's like, to the psych world, they get it, but maybe to like society, they're like, what does that mean? You know? Well,
that's the other weird thing, right? Is that some dance therapists are therapists, and they might have, you know, Freudian background, Rogerian background, as you say, CBT even, and others are just completely untrained as therapists in any way. Correct. And they're movers. And sometimes they're kind of more learning from a kind of intuitive movement perspective, and they might not know even the basics of therapeutic rules, therapeutic listening. Mm-hmm. And I think there's almost this like intuitive quality to a lot of people, I think, in this field, who they don't want to necessarily break things down, cut things apart, analyze things. It's just sort of not in their nature somehow.
Right. And I think it comes down to what your client or who the people that you're working with really need. So, I'm very open with my clients at the beginning that I'm not, tight and medically based, but I am very clinical. And so if you want somebody who's going to be able to sit, process, but also move through things, then I'm your therapist. But if you're looking for somebody with a more authentic approach, a more spiritual approach, a real, true, embodied, like no talking approach, then I'm probably not the right therapist for you. And so it's nice that there's variety, but in that variety, we can't lose who we are. We can't lose and dilute our field, because it's a danger to its thriving, I think.
I don't know how people choose. I mean, like, I've only just started to make sense of the embodiment field. Yeah. And it's my full-time job. I've interviewed over 200 people.
You seem to have it down.
I feel like I'm as well versed in the breadth of embodiment as almost anyone in the world. Yeah. And I still feel like I'm just getting my head around it. Yeah. Like, I'm just going, okay, I kind of know who I would recommend to go to a Reiki and body therapist rather than a BMC therapist or a dance movement therapist. I'm kind of getting a felt sense of that now. I'm kind of like, in the book that I just wrote, is a lot about that. Like, how do you make sense of it all? Yeah. And but it's big, it's complex, right? It's a hell of a field we're in.
Well, wouldn't you say, like, we're always changing? I mean, our bodies and the way we move it doesn't have to be static, right? Like, it can be dynamic, especially if we are embracing how we move and we're really trying to expand who we are through movement, then that's always changing. So if I'm confident in who I am personally as I'm moving, but I'm always increasing my movement repertoire, or I'm always encountering new clients and taking on their movements, then even my practice is going to be changing.
Right.
So,
right.
So there's like this embodied, like, ever-changing aspect to what we do, as opposed to, like you said, here's the theorist, this is who we're following, this is what it looks like, done. So,
well, movement and change is just absolutely tied in with what we do, right? So it's, to make a standard school or even a still point for a moment is kind of tricky. There's almost as many schools of dance therapy as there are dance therapists, right?
I wish there were more schools than there were, but I think more schools of thought, for sure.
That's what I mean. Yeah, not necessarily official.
Right. University.
There's not that many in the UK, actually. It's still a fairly obscure thing. There's not that many places you can go study it. In UK, it's weird. There's MAs. You can do like academic qualifications in dance therapy. At Goldsmiths, which is a pretty, academic place, and in Roehampton in London, and it's sort of surreal to me. You go and you have to like write papers about dance therapy, and I think they do quite a lot of practice as well. But a student of mine went to one and said, "Yeah, you won't like this, Mark, because it's like lots of papers and stuff." And I was like, "Wow, that's kind of surreal." And there was a body therapy school called the Chiron Center in the UK that was very well thought of, but then closed down because the people that running it happened to kind of want to close it down. They got old and there's no one to take over. It just seems like there isn't quite the organizational support for dance movement therapy and body therapy in the same way as there is for sort of some other disciplines that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I find, and I had this within my own company too, of like, how do I stay true to this embodied work, but also take the tools and resources that I need to run a business? And those two things don't always go hand in hand. Like,
right.
Our association, whether it's a local chapter or a national chapter, we're creatives, and creativity doesn't always run a business. So, how can we draw upon both? I mean, I'm fortunate that my spouse is a business guy. And so anytime I have business questions, I'm like, how do I do this? What does it look like? And he can really break it down for me, and I can adapt it to what I need. But not everybody has that support. Not everybody has that availability or the money to hire somebody to do that. And then we're kind of running our businesses from this creative place, and then we're not profitable, or we're not creating business development opportunities. We're not marketing the way that we need to just not even survive, but like sometimes make ends meet. So it's very challenging. Like I found early on when I started my practice, I was talking to a lot of colleagues about just like business basics, and we'd talk about networking and marketing. And it was like these foreign concepts to a lot of us because it's not taught in school. Like
right. And this is what I want to talk about. Because, I reached out to you. You definitely look competent. You were saying interesting stuff, but I was seeing your memes and you were out there and I'm like, hang on a minute, this person can't be the most experienced dance therapist in the United States.
No, I'm
They're
not.
just not old enough. They're just not old enough. I was like, this person kind of like my age, a bit younger maybe. I was like, okay, they can't be I was like, okay, maybe in their 30s, whatever. You don't need to tell me how old you are, but I was pretty clear this person's not.
No, you're spot on. Yeah.
And I was like, but she's putting herself out there. Some people get resentful of that because I'm the same. I kind of reached out to you a little bit like birds of a feather. I was like, this is someone who's good at what they do and knows how to put herself out there and isn't ashamed of it. And now there is a national difference between the UK and the US in this. Yeah. We're even more worried to put ourselves out there in the UK. But this does seem to be a bit of a thing in this field that people either are ashamed to put themselves out there or they're just not good at it. They just don't have the business skills. Do you know what I mean? And not even basic business skills. I'm not talking like start Tesla up or something, right? I'm talking about just basic like 101 marketing skills that, as you rightly say, though, we're not taught in schools. So it's no one's fault. But it's sort of their responsibility to not learn it. Like you can learn this stuff from podcasts. But like I just bought a book on book marketing because I've got a book coming out. I listened to a podcast for free on book marketing.
I read the first chapter. I'm waiting for the
next. Thank you very much. You're getting sent a copy. And so I was like, this isn't that hard. Like I must have spent no more than $50, like the equivalent of $50 to get some information on marketing a book, right? And it took me maybe 20 hours to read the books and listen to the podcast and ask advice of a couple of people. I phoned up a couple of friends who'd written books.
Quick interruption to tell you about my book, Embodiment. Creatively named, hey? Actually, Embodiment Moving Beyond Mindfulness. You can find this online at theembodimentbook.com. That's theembodimentbook.com. So this book is an introduction to the whole field. If you like these interviews, you'll probably love this book. Funny stuff, poems, personal stories from my life, illustrating what embodiment is all about, and loads for professionals in the field too. Top teaching tips, language tips, that kind of thing. Yeah, a real condensation of everything I've learned about embodiment, basically. So you can get pre-orders at Amazon.com, and if you just put in Embodiment Moving Beyond Mindfulness, that's the name of the book, or go to theembodimentbook.com. On there, you'll see quotes from various teachers, a bunch of fun illustrations, and you can also get the first chapter completely free online at theembodimentbook.com. Enjoy, and back to the interview.
I'm not like advanced level book marketer now, but I got the basics. And I went, okay, if I spent a few hundred, maybe 1,000 hours writing this bloody book,
right,
I should at least be willing to spend 50 hours learning how to market the bloody thing.
Yeah.
So I sort of don't get why our people in our professions, like, we're in related professions, why are we so crap at this stuff?
I love your bluntness. So to validate that point, yeah, for the most part, we seem to be kind of sometimes dense around it. One, I think from the get-go, it's not taught. Not that it needs to be, but like it's not even a glimmer in the curriculum of a lot of, at least in dance therapy curriculums that I know of. It again, you're kind of like you got to fend for yourself afterwards, and that's. I guess it's not a bad thing. It's just, for me, that's where the initiative comes in. I'm like, well, I'm going to make this happen, and I'm going to find every resource possible to do that, while also conserving my money, because I don't want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on something that I can't follow through with. So,
right. This is almost why we should be great at this, because we spend all this money and all this effort to try to learn something we love. Right.
Right.
And then, most of the time we're not trained that much on these courses. I think it's a bit remiss of the courses whether it's a yoga course or, I always try and add a bit of marketing into my courses for students,
Yeah.
And so it's like, we should be great at this because who else is going to do it?
Right. And we're very creative people. So, I mean, to me, that's really what marketing is. I mean, I shouldn't say there's no, because it's not my field, but it's not necessarily that there's, one standard way of doing anything, but it's about kind of taking some of these principles and then applying your own creativity to it. So, honestly, this to me is marketing. So I remember when I was starting out, some of the basics are business cards and flyers or brochures, depending on who you're working with. In a very medically based field in Chicago, where I was kind of trying to poke my head into, people wanted business cards. They wanted your credentials. They wanted to see what services you offered. So I remember somebody saying, well, do you have a brochure? And I said, oh yeah, but I don't have it with me. Can I have your email? And I'll email you an electronic copy. And no joke, I went home and worked for 3 hours putting together my very first brochure and sent it through them, as a PDF. Got an immediate response. Thank you. This is lovely. I can't wait to pass it out to people. So I was like,
great.
You're welcome.
But this is what I don't get. We're
marketing.
People who are we're dancers, right? You might be a therapist. I might be a mover another way, but we're dance people. Like, surely movement, responsiveness, creativity, listening. This is the essence of marketing. It's simply to listen to your client, to be able to move, to be able to respond, to be able to do something creative, to be able to be of service. I mean, the essence of marketing is nothing other than the essence of sort of good dancing and good, if not therapist, then facilitation, right? As a facilitator, my job is to listen and be responsive. Well, that's what I do to the market. Like, we're doing the embodiment conference next year, and we're like telling everyone how big it's going to be. And then I kind of was like listening and feeling, and people were like, yeah, we don't want big, we want personal. And now I'm like, oh shit. Okay. Man. So now I'm like being creative and I'm saying, right, it's going to be huge, but everyone's going to have a little group of 5 and you get to meet these same 5 people every day. And all the introverts like, yay, and it's like, okay, because that's listening and responsiveness and creativity. Like, that's dance.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's like the dance of the business of dance, or the dance of business, I should say, not the business of dance. But yeah, I think some people are just afraid to jump in. One thing is it's hard. We don't know what to do, or we don't know where to start. So either we turn to like a coach, business coach, who we feel like can do it for us, although not many of them are schooled in this particular case, the creative arts therapies. The other thing that you started to touch on that I think is a big one for us is we're afraid to step into the limelight. We're afraid to be seen as an expert. And I think, like, I've seen it. And you're absolutely right. And I will say this over and over again. I'm not the most seasoned therapist. And for a while I was like, why would I put myself out there if I don't have 40 plus years of experience behind my belt? And after a while I said, I don't want to wait for the next person to do it because it's taken 60 years already. And people,
and you're not going to be doing it in 20 years if you're not making any money on it anyway, right?
I'm like, people,
you're not going to get to that point.
People need to know what we do. And so I've always been very open about the fact that the reason I started marketing and really putting myself out there was so that my business continued. Because if I didn't market, my very well-being, my livelihood, the business that I put all my heart and soul into was going to tank.
Well, like, sustainability is supposedly a value many of us have. And I often frame it this way with students. I say, look, it's not about being greedy. It's not about trying to be Bill Gates and become the richest guy in America, because let's face it, none of us are. Like, even if I do amazingly well with all my projects, I'm not going to beat Bill Gates, and it's or even J.K. Rowling, it's not going to happen. And it's like, but if we're going to keep doing what we love, if we're going to keep helping the people we want to help, both of those things are important to me, then we need to be sustainable. That's what I think marketing is really about, is sustainability.
Absolutely.
And then it brings up so much internal stuff. I mean, I need a dance therapist to sell dance therapy, right? Like all the stuff that comes up for my students around shame and being seen and not being good enough, particularly, and this is what I know, is particularly those from working class backgrounds in the UK. The ones who come from richer backgrounds, they somehow are more okay with putting themselves out. And it's not, I think this is one of the self-fulfilling prophecies of class. Yeah. It's not, and maybe this is other demographics like ethnicities in the UK, in the States. Class tends to be the overriding one here. And I really noticed that. And it wasn't that the posh students were like corrupt or having other opportunities. It was more that they sort of felt okay on some deep level in doing it. And the working class ones take way more coaching, way more. That's what I've noticed. I don't know if you notice any differences between colleagues or groups of colleagues, men, women, like how does this break down? I mean, are we talking about everyone or just ourselves?
Right. No, that's a really interesting point. I mean, I know that that all plays a role, and I think sometimes what I tend to see, and this is just from the people that are sharing those experiences, but I've actually seen more of a connection to not necessarily just race or culture or class, but also our backgrounds, like our experiences, like, in terms of even mental health, right? Like, is there systemic, trauma in my family that's preventing me from stepping into or wanting to be seen or vulnerable? Because if my connection to vulnerability is not where it needs to be into the spotlight, then I never will be able to. So, you kind of have to look, a lot of us healer, I was just on a podcast called Conversations with the Wounded Healer, talking about how we're all wounded healers in a sense. And if we don't hone those or work with those quote wounds, they will become our weak spot, And so in terms of marketing, it's like, if I'm not comfortable being vulnerable for whatever reason, then I'm not
vulnerability is a big one.
What's that?
I got naked on a chair to prove this point once, but we don't talk about that. Like, you know what? It's interesting as well.
So I can't see anything.
It's all on the podcast. There's the one problem with podcasts, But so, I noticed this with my students as well, that when I'm teaching them this, all that family stuff comes out. I just spent 5 days with an Israeli guy, and all his trauma stuff was coming out about like scarcity and having had families who starved in the Holodomor and the Holocaust and this kind of thing. And it was like, okay, scarcity was there for him. But another thing that was there for him because of his background was confidence. Like he's not a religious Jew, but he's got this sense of like, I can do it. I'm special, And it's like he was talking about this and laughing about this. It gives him a certain confidence that some of my British or Irish students, for example, don't necessarily have. And it was, so it's like he was both like held back by some things in his personal and familial background, and others was kind of helped. And another thing I just noticed is like that ability to make a request is so key. Like you just said, hey, I was on this cool podcast, and my mind immediately went, cool. Can you hook me up?
Yeah.
Like if we went on a podcast, I would have gone, oh, can you give me the email? Like, who's the person? And I'd happily share back, and I'd be reciprocal, and I'd say, oh, you should come on this one. I've got a big. So it's like, this is that ability to ask for what you want.
Right. And I think
to be a big thing, right? Like that's what a sale is.
And I can only speak to, I guess in this case, like the American experience, which even that is like totally eclectic. But I feel like what I see, at least from like social media on this side, it's very like I take what I want, and that's not always a good thing. And I don't mean that in a like, screw everybody else, but it's like I've listened to podcasts or I've seen articles, and rather than say, oh, I want to do that, or why wasn't that me? I said, that is going to be me. And I started just reaching out to the people who run those. I'm like,
great. So what I'm going to interrupt. I hope you don't mind. I've been in Israel, so it's in my blood now. So this is a key thing here I want listeners to get. Yeah. When you see someone succeeding, rather than being resentful and being like in a victim mode of kind of like, and there's an embodiment to that, right? Yeah. Of like, well, that person's cheating and they're mean, and who do they think they are? Often what that's pointing to is a sort of lack of confidence or insecurity, and actually go, you know what? Instead of feeling bad about them, I'll feel good for them. Yeah. I'm going to make a choice to say, good for Erica. Look at all this way. I see your memes. I'm like, good for her. She's putting herself out there. Why not? She seems like she knows her stuff. Why not? And then, okay, how can that inspire me to actually put myself forward? Yeah. And if I see someone who's putting themselves forward who I think's rubbish, there's a couple of people in this field, I go, oh God, they don't even have an embodiment practice. That inspires me even more.
Right,
I'm like, God damn it. It's like if you're putting yourself out there, Right. So it's like, either way, whether I love the person, respect them, or I don't, either way, it's motivating for me.
Well, I realized too that like somebody else's success doesn't minimize my own. And the funny thing is like, even across, like outside of the field, like social media, I have this love hate, I'd see like a lifestyle guru or, a beauty blogger or something. And I'm like, oh man, they're on Oprah's reading list and they're on the Today Show, and like started to feel bad about myself. And I thought, wait a minute, they're not even in the same field. So it's like, let's look at what other people are accomplishing. You can't compare.
It's not like with like, you can't compare.
And be inspired by that, So that really lit that fire under me to just find the resources and start pitching. Just start pitching things, because you could pitch hundreds of TV segments, radio segments, news articles for one thing to get picked up. And sometimes all you need is that one thing, So
I've been on 15 or 20 podcasts this year, but we must have written to 50.
Yeah.
And most of them just say, they don't mock you or attack you. They just say like one really nice one, Mind Body podcast, cool guy who runs it. He just say, you know what, Mark, I'm in LA and I do these things face to face. I won't do it online. If you're ever in LA, look me up. Take care. I was like, well, that's nice. Even this is a nice decline. I don't have to get upset about that. The guy does it face to face. He's in LA. I'm not. I'm like, just Steve, it's no big deal. So it's like, I don't know what this fear is. And British people definitely have this, that like to ask is somehow too much, Maybe it's just rejection. I guess we all fear rejection.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel that. I guess I've just, at this point, I mean, even though it's young and it's early in my career, I've been putting myself out there, I'd say for the last 7 years pretty consistently, that rejection feels normal. I'm like, I almost expect it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write this message. It's going to be great. And they're going to say no, and it's okay. But when I get the yes back, I'm like, what? Wait, did I read that right? I almost question it. I'm like, you are interested?
Right.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
So it's like,
that's what it's like being
failure. Coming from
that's what it's like being
perfectionist. Practice
right, the perfectionist. Okay, yeah, because once you do failure is something as you do more of, you realize it's less and less bad.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No
it's like, and also,
it.
I frame success as in the trying, not in the outcome.
Yes.
So I go, okay, success for me is asking, not getting the result. Mm-hmm. So that way, this is a kind of stoic thing. I've kind of already
that helps us with our language. Like just asking or putting yourself out there helps practice that language that's going to help people understand what we do.
Right. I interviewed a guy for 7 minutes today I was looking for a marketing coach. He got recommended to me. This guy, I was thinking, okay, I'm willing to pay him, $500 an hour because it's an important thing. Uh-huh. And he couldn't pitch to me. And I was like, if this guy's going to teach me marketing, he can't pitch to me. Yeah. After 7 minutes, I said, this isn't a good fit. Thank you so much for your time. Have a nice day. He said, really? After 7 minutes? I'm like, dude, you should be able to do this after 1 minute, maximum 3 minutes. Like, this is your job. You're a marketing person. Right. But the thing is, he just wasn't experienced enough, because once you've talked to a whole bunch of clients, you've got, like you had today, the examples you can give, you can talk about it, you can be personable about it, you can tune into maybe like what they're most interested in what you have to offer. And and that doesn't come naturally. You say that is a thing you need to practice.
Yeah. I would say, and I'm very open about this. A few years ago, I started by investing in some marketing, and went to just some.
What did you go for?
Well, I used lovely social media, Facebook.
Yeah.
And I just started in my community, and I said, can anybody recommend local PR, or publicist?
Right.
That wasn't even schooled in a certain area, but just knew the Chicago-based market really well. And I had not invested any of my profits. I had not reinvested into the business. They were just sitting in savings. So I decided, okay, this is where I'm going to start on my marketing journey. I'm not going to pay for, an SEO. I'm not going to pay for social media marketing. I'm going to pay to sit down with somebody face to face and really learn the ins and outs of how to get in front of people, how to pitch, and how to create these segments. So met with these two, actually in the end, a team of 3 wonderful ladies that just very early on exposed me to some local news resources. Within a year and a half, we were pitching local TV. So like, our Fox News, we've got WGN, we have CBS affiliate. And the only reason why I stopped working with them per se was because the market was changing, and a lot of it was like what we call pay to play. So it was like we're pitching the same things, but the hosts are turning over, the radio stations are having difficulty, budgets aren't being met, and they need money. So I wasn't willing to put in more money, knowing that
mainstream media is dying. Mainstream media is absolutely dying. Tell you what, why don't we just throw out there some resources to listeners, because people might be going, where do I start? And I did an episode on marketing that people can look up on the podcast, and we had Tad Hargrave on, who does marketing for hippies, who's great.
Okay.
So there's a couple of episodes on the podcast. I just read a book called Your First 1,000 Copies, and it's about book marketing, but it's really about any kind of sales funnel, which is the main thing people need to learn.
Okay.
There's Marie Foley, isn't it, who does her kind of internet, kind of social media stuff. She's got a lot of free stuff on her site. And also I'd say to people out there, just go to your local, we call them technical college in the UK. Yeah. Do like a 10 evening Tuesday night course for £100 in England. The government sponsor these kind of things. Speak to people who know about businesses, who run other kind of businesses. Find your friend who runs a dry cleaning business. Yeah. Follow people who do, like Irene Lyon, we had on the show, trauma therapist. She does great marketing. She sold out 3 workshops in Brighton, capacity, fairly high ticket price, first time she's ever in the UK, because she does great marketing. So I tell all my students, follow her stuff. Yeah. So it's like follow 5 or 6 people you think are cool marketing and get good ideas. You don't want to copy their exact thing they're doing, but get inspiration,
Right.
What would you say to people who are listening and they're like, I just don't know where to start. I haven't got much money. Like, what would you say? Like, where are some good kind of resources or good places to start?
Yeah. So, I mean, outside of resources, the first thing that I always say is like, practice talking about yourself. That's a really hard thing to do. So, start with, I know it's basic and some people say that it's dying, but like I'm still a big believer of having some type of piece of paper, like a business card, because I can't tell you how many people I've run into in the most obscure places that have actually taken my services. Like I'm in the line at the grocery store and I see somebody behind me like melting down. I'm like, are you okay? What's going on? Or you just never know when somebody's gonna, even if they're not using me as their therapist, like people just want resources, and it gives you the opportunity to practice not just your quote pitch, but to really connect to people and explain what you do. So for
if you have one pitch, it's a bad pitch, right? You need to be able to like connect and listen and then say, okay, how does what I authentically love to offer and authentically I know can help with match to this person's needs and interests?
Yeah. So that's my number one is still like, even if it's a handwritten, creative business card, like make a business card. The second one for me is actually kind of what I alluded to before, that as you're reading articles or listening to podcasts or, looking through the media yourself, even if you're not ready to make the leap, start keeping a list of the people that are writing those articles, of the people that are, leading or facilitating the podcasts or whatever the media you're interested in. Stop looking at it as, wow, that should have been me, and be proactive. I've actually had, not necessarily, it hasn't always turned into something, but I've had a lot of success actually just looking for the author of an article, emailing them, because everybody's email is accessible with a little bit of digging. And they respond, they're like, wow, thank you for reading my article, or I'm so glad it touched you. And I always interject, like, are you familiar with dance movement therapy? This is why your article touched me. And some people will say, yes, I am. And others are like, no, what is that? I'd love to hear more. So it allows you to start a conversation. So write down the interesting articles, podcasts, radio segments, like write down who's running them. A really easy thing to do, because they're not always the one in charge, is to go to LinkedIn, you search producer and whatever the media is. And oftentimes the producers on those shows will pop up, and you can find their emails or you can find their numbers to call them.
Great. You see, what I'm loving here is that I never use LinkedIn, and you obviously do, and that's fine.
until
you know what I mean?
started looking for
But
producers.
what I mean is there's so like you're doing quite a lot of PR. I've just started doing PR. I've done a lot of Facebook. Maybe that's not your thing. You know, like there's so many ways to do this if you're creative, and people can really just go with what appeals to them and what matches their market as well, right?
Yeah.
So you know, for me, this is you don't have to do it your way or my way, right? There's a lot of ways to do this.
No, I Google searched one time. I forgot what I put in, but I ended up finding this huge PDF file of all of these media producers across the world. But I was looking for like national news, Good Morning America, Today Show, and it was some of them were outdated, but there were a lot that were still working. And I thought, wow, this person put a lot of time and effort into this, and now they're sharing it with whoever finds it. So that was actually how I got connected to a lot of different television shows, which I have yet to be on, but just, having connections to some of the producers is at least a foot in the door.
Okay, well, you've been on some TV. I've got your website in front of me. So
well,
my laptop's falling off my lap here. And so how's that? Like, I haven't done much TV. How's it going on telly? Like, is it scary? You okay with it? Like, this is you on Good Day Chicago with a cheesy grin. Like, how is it?
Yeah, actually, I think the photo you're talking about was probably the first opportunity I ever got. And part of me was terrified, but, I think I was like, okay, if this is the only chance I get, if this is my, so to speak, 15 minutes, which it wasn't, it was like 2, but,
cut down to 1. Yeah.
How am I gonna make the most of this? And oddly enough, I think that first segment, it was dance therapy, but it wasn't. So it's also about looking how else can you market what you do. So it's very rare that I get the opportunity to talk about an entire segment about dance therapy, but it's what's going on now, right? Violence in the world is sadly always a topic. Mental health, different months, right? We just got done with we're in Alzheimer's Awareness Month. We just got out of Parkinson's. There's autism awareness. Like, what are the populations that you're working with, or who are your clients that you connect to?
Right.
And reaching in that way. So I think the segment that we did was how to basically like how to de-stress your kids at the beginning of the school year. Like, how do we, our kids have a lot of anxiety. Some of them are excited. Some of them are freaking out. How do we get them in their bodies so that they can, kind of sit with and manage some of the anxiety that comes up? And at the very end of the segment, it was like, so you're a dance therapist. What is that? I'm like, oh, that's an entire show. And so it was really cool. And I kind of got the bug. Like, after that, I was like, I have to do this again. This was a really fun opportunity.
How did you, last question on this, because we need to move on. I think we've actually get up on something that's really useful for everyone. And I'm super passionate about this because I want to see kind of like good embodiment people get this stuff out there.
Sure.
I coach mentees on this all the time. I love this stuff. How did you deal with the nerves? Because I remember the first time I did a big talk in Russia, or the first time I, did a big stage in England was even worse, actually. I was pretty nervous. And I imagine TV is kind of like that, but times 10. So like, what did you do? Did you do some body stuff? Did you just smile and get on with it? Like, what was your strategy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think at the very beginning, I didn't even really have time to think about it, which was helpful. Like, being out of my head actually kept me in my body. So just being very task oriented, I was like, okay, I'm dressed. I put on some makeup. The producer's coming in and telling me I need to get mic'd up. I didn't really have time to be nervous until you're sitting down. And then, to be honest, a lot of the outside of like these live shows, which I have not done yet, there's nobody there. It's a host and it's you and it's cameras. That's it. There's no staff. They've gotten rid of so many staff.
Wow, interesting.
Right, that there's nobody watching me. So part of me was like, I'm just having
this is easier than when I'm talking to 12 people in the local community center, right? I'm just talking to one person. And I guess they're pretty good at it. Like, in the same way as, hopefully as a podcast host, I'm pretty good at putting people at ease most of the time. But I don't think many of my guests get nervous. They don't stay nervous. Okay, so we do need to wrap up, Erica. This has been fun. I think we're definitely birds of a feather. So, if you haven't had an invite to the Embodiment Conference, you're super welcome. So just reach out to Daniela and she'll get you on.
Hey.
And if you want to join us for that, you're super welcome. And if you're over in the UK, as ever, look me up. Do you have two things to finish? So where can people find out more about you? There's a couple of websites I've got here.
Yeah, so they can just find me at ericahornthal.com.
And that's Horn.
Yeah, HORNTHAL.
Yep.
Hornthal.
Got it.
So
Got it.
that's probably the best way. Or you can find me on Instagram, is where I post a lot of those memes you were talking about.
I'm memeing you. I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm putting the love hearts on Instagram now.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, if you have any questions like that, I'm an open book. I love when people email me, or even my phone number is very available online. Call me, and
Cool.
yeah, I love to share resources. It's not proprietary to me. So
nice one. You've got a Nietzsche quote as your latest meme. You see, this is way better than some yoga bullshit. Yeah, great, good stuff. Okay, Nietzsche's right up there with me. Okay, and normally I say a closing message about the body, but today a closing message about the business of the body.
Oh, well, I think this still applies. My favorite saying is, the body holds answers to questions the mind doesn't know to ask. And the same thing is true in business and marketing.
That's some deep shit. Erica, I like it a lot. This has been loads of fun. I hope we bump into each other. So, yeah, I need to run now. I'm talking to someone in 2 minutes' time. So let's leave it there. Erica, thank you so much for your time today. Much
Thanks,
appreciated.
Mark. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Yeah, really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodyfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodyfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So yeah, I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodyfacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you. Until next time, welcome home to the body.